The scent of lavender and aged wood always welcomed me at Serenity Now Yoga, a calm, familiar smell that usually started loosening the tension in my shoulders before I even unrolled my mat. I'm Eleanor, by the way. 53 if anyone's counting. Though truth be told, I often feel like a mix of ages stitched together. Some days I'm full of sass like a 20-something. Other days I'm practical like a sensible 40-year-old. And lately there's been a whole lot of, where did I put my glasses? The studio, with its smooth wooden floors and sunlit windows, had become my haven. A peaceful corner of the world where the creaks in my joints felt more like gentle reminders than outright complaints. That Tuesday, class had been especially tough. A new instructor, young, flexible, and full of bouncy energy, led us through a set of poses that nearly turned me into a human pretzel. But oddly, I felt clearer, more grounded than I had in weeks. I was toweling off and basking in that post-yoga glow when my phone buzzed inside my bag. Its ringtone, a cheerful little chime, sounded half apologetic. It was Carol. "Oh, Eleanor, sweetie, I'm so sorry." Her voice burst through, full of the usual mix of chaos and warmth. The car, she just died, right there in the middle of the grocery store parking lot, like she's protesting life itself. I leaned against the cool studio wall, smiling despite the situation. Carol's car troubles were nothing new. "Don't worry," I told her. "These things happen. Is your ice cream melting? That's the least of my problems right now. But what about you? How are you getting home?" "I'll manage," I said, already going through my mental list. A cab might take a while. The bus route zigzagged all over town. Maybe I could levitate. I did hold Warrior 3 for a full 10 seconds today. Carol laughed, raspy and amused. "You're a saint. Listen, I might have a solution. It's kind of a stretch and maybe a little weird. But are you open to it?" "Color me curious," I said. "Go on." "Well, you remember my son Liam? He's in town, helping me sort through his dad's old workshop. He just finished some errands near your yoga place. I could call him and see if he can swing by and pick you up." Liam. I hadn't seen him in years, mostly just during holiday get-togethers or summer barbecues. A good kid, from what I remembered. Polite, quiet, with his father's kind eyes and that messy dark hair that somehow always looked cool without trying. The last time I saw him, he'd just finished college, all nerves and eagerness. He'd be close to 30 now, a proper adult. "Oh, I wouldn't want to trouble him," I said honestly. It felt strange, asking someone's grown child for a ride, especially when I barely knew him anymore. "Nonsense," Carol said, brushing off my worry. "He's got nothing going on. And frankly, talking to someone besides me, and a garage full of dusty tools might do him some good. Let me just text him. He won't mind. He's in your area, and he's driving his dad's old truck, ugly as ever, but it runs." Before I could protest again, she added, "He'll call you if he can do it. Love you," and hung up. I sighed, half amused and half unsure. The idea of Liam giving me a ride felt unexpected. Not bad, just oddly timed. I grabbed my yoga mat and water bottle, the calming scent of lavender still clinging to my skin, now mixed with the faint tang of sweat and effort. Outside, the late afternoon sun was starting to dip, painting the sky with soft gold and hints of purple. The air was warm, filled with city sounds and birds settling in for the evening. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I answered. Double quotes, "Hi, is this Eleanor?" A calm voice asked. "It's Liam, Carol's son." His voice was deeper than I remembered, smooth, steady, not the slightly awkward tone of the boy I once knew. "Liam," Oh, your mom said you might be able to rescue me. He laughed softly. No rescue needed, just a ride. She said you're at Serenity Now Yoga on Elm Street. That's right. I'm about 10 minutes away. I'm in a green Ford pickup. That looks like it fought a bear and lost, but it still runs. You'll see it. I laughed. Sounds like a beauty. I'll keep watch. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, an old dark green Ford pickup pulled up in front of the studio. It looked weathered but strong, like it had stories to tell. The window was down, and Liam leaned over the seat, smiling. Familiar, yet older. His dark hair was still that perfect mess, but now a few silver strands glinted at his temples. He still had his dad's kind eyes, but now with a quieter, more thoughtful look. Eleanor? He called, voice warm. Liam, I said, walking toward the truck. Thanks so much for this. You're saving the day. He leaned over and pushed the door open. Glad to help. Hop in. Mum was panicking about leaving you stranded. The inside of the truck was cleaner than I expected. It smelled faintly of old vinyl, coffee, and something fresh like pine. The bench seat was wide and worn but comfortable. As I buckled in, I noticed a dog-eared paperback tucked into the door pocket, something historical. So, I said as he pulled smoothly away from the curb, your mom said you're helping with your dad's workshop. That sounds like a big job. He nodded, eyes on the road. Yeah. Dad kept everything, tools, half-finished projects, you name it. Going through it feels like solving a quiet puzzle. I smiled gently. David was always tinkering. He was, Liam said, a fondness in his voice. It's strange, but I feel like I'm having a long, silent conversation with him as I sort through it all. His words surprised me, a kind of gentle depth I didn't expect so soon into our drive. I thought we'd stick to small talk about traffic or yoga, but this felt different. Honest, that's a lovely way to describe it, I said. He glanced at me, his expression soft. Mom said you always understood Dad's quieter side. I think quiet people often have the most to say, I replied. They just wait for the right moment. That earned me another smile, genuine and relaxed. Well, I'll try not to. Be too quiet. Mom also told me to be on my best behavior. I laughed. Oh, Carol. Don't worry, I'm not easily offended. Just be yourself. Where to, by the way? Maple Drive, near the park. Got it, he said, turning on his signal. So, did you reach Yoga Nirvana today? Or just survive the stretches? I chuckled, settling more comfortably into the seat. The initial awkwardness had already faded into something that felt natural, easy. And as the truck rumbled along, with the sun beginning to dip behind the rooftops, I had a feeling this unexpected ride home was about to turn into something more meaningful than either of us planned. I always loved being in his workshop as a kid, the smell of sawdust, the way he could take a rough piece off wood and turn it into something beautiful. There's a certain honesty to working with your hands. No, I do. I replied, there's a satisfaction in creating something tangible. My grandmother taught me to knit when I was a girl. I still pick up the needles when I need to quiet my mind. It's a different kind of making, but I think the feeling is similar. Liam nodded. Exactly, it's a kind of meditation. Isn't it, the focused rhythm? He paused, then added, Mum still has that lopsided blue scarf Yauk knitted for her years ago. She wears it every winter. I laughed, surprised and touched. Oh, goodness, that lopsided thing I was just learning. I'm amazed it hasn't unraveled into a pile of yarn by now. She loves it, he said, simply says it's imbued with your good intentions. His sincerity was disarming. It wasn't flattery, it felt like a simple statement of fact. I found myself warming to him more with each passing mile. This wasn't the perfunctory chore I'd half expected him to treat this, as he seemed genuinely present, engaged in our conversation. We were approaching a part of town I didn't often drive through a slightly older neighborhood with charming, well-kept houses and mature trees that formed a leafy canopy over the street. The setting sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the road in shifting patterns of light and shadow. You know, Liam said, his voice a little more thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot about Dad's things. It's more than just stuff, each tool, each unfinished project. It tells a story about his passions, his frustrations, even his dreams. I think objects can hold so much of us. I agreed. Memories, emotion. My mother passed going through her jewelry box was like revisiting different chapters of her life. String of pearls from her wedding day, a cookie enamel pin from a trip she took in the 70s each. One a little key to a memory. Exactly that, he said, his gaze distant for a moment, as if looking at something far beyond the windshield. It's made me think about what we leave behind. Not just the physical things, but the impact we have, the stories people will tell about us. This was getting unexpected. Like, I found myself both surprised and moved. It wasn't every day you had this kind of conversation with someone you barely knew, let alone someone a good 20 years younger. There was no pretense with them, no attempt to impress, just an open, honest exploration of ideas. That's a profound thought, Liam, I said, and a heavy one to be carrying around while you were sorting through boxes. He gave a small wry smile. Yeah, well, it beats trying to figure out why he owned 3 different slightly broken hedge trimmers. I laugh. It sound easy and genuine in the cab of the old truck. Practicality has its place too. It does, he conceded. He then turned onto a street I didn't recognize. Mind if I take a slightly scenic route? There's a view I always liked around here, and the light should be just about perfect, not at all, I said, intrigued. Lead on the street, climbed a gentle hill, the houses giving way to a small unkempt park. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road beneath a large oak tree and switched off the engine. The southern silence was filled with the sound of crickets starting their evening chorus and the distant bark of a dog. This was one of Dad's spots, Liam said softly, his voice tinged with a quiet nostalgia. He used to bring me up here sometimes when I was a kid just to look out over the city. He gestured towards the view below us. The city spread out like a glittering tapestry, the lights just beginning to twinkle on as dusk settled. The sky above was a masterpiece of soft purples, pinks, and fading oranges. It was breathtaking. Oh, Liam, I breathed. It's beautiful. Yeah, he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He always said it helped him put things in perspective. All those little lights, all those lives, makes your own worries seem a bit smaller somehow. We sat there for a few moments in comfortable silence, watching the day give way to evening. The air through the open windows was cool and fresh, carrying scent of damp earth and distant woods. There was a sense of peace in that old truck, a quiet understanding that flowed between us, unspoken yet deeply felt. It was more than just a ride home, no. It was becoming something else, something I hadn't anticipated at all. A connection, perhaps a shared moment of quiet reflection that felt surprisingly significant. I found myself thinking about my own life, my routines, the comfortable, sometimes predictable path usually trod. There was nothing wrong with it, not really. But this chance encounter, this unexpected detour with Carol's son, felt like a small invigorating breeze ruffling a still surface. He was so young, yet he possessed a thoughtfulness, a quiet wisdom that seemed beyond his years. Or perhaps it was exactly of his years, and I just hadn't been paying enough attention to the generation coming up behind mine. Thank you for sharing this with me, Liam, I said, finally breaking the stillness. My voice sounded a little huskier than usual. He turned to me, his expression open, his eyes reflecting the fading light. Thanks for letting me sometimes. It's easier to share these kinds of things with someone who's not right in the middle of it all with you. No? I nodded. Do understand, a fresh perspective can be a gift. He started that truck again, the engine rumbling back to life, a familiar comforting sound. Now all right. Maple Drive, you said, let's get you home before your ice cream melts. Oh, wait, it was Mom's problem, wasn't it? I smiled it was, but the sentiment is appreciated as we drove down from the overlook. The city lights growing brighter, I felt a subtle shift within Meth. Yoga class had stretched my body, but this unexpected journey with Liam was stretching my mind, my heart in ways I hadn't even realized they'd needed. The conversation wasn't over, I sensed. There was more to explore, more to understand in the shared space of this old green truck. The initial curiosity had deepened into a genuine interest, not just in him, but in the unexpected turns life could take. The surprising connections that could form when you least expected them. The streets we drove through now were more familiar, leading towards my neighborhood. The houses were similar in style, older, well-maintained with gardens just starting to show their summer abundance. Liam navigated them with an easy familiarity, as if he'd driven these routes many times before, though I suspected he was mostly following memory or a good sense of direction. So this carpentry work, I began picking up the thread of our earlier conversation. Is it something you always knew you wanted to do? He took a moment before answering thoughtfully, not consciously. I don't think I loved being around Dad's workshop, like I said. But when I was younger, I had all sorts of other ideas for a while. I thought I wanted to be an architect, then a writer. I even flirted with the idea of being a park ranger at one point. He chuckled softly. I guess I was searching for something that felt true, meaningful, and carpentry feels that way to you. It does, he affirmed, his voice resonating with a quiet conviction. There's a directness to it. You take raw material and you shape it. You solve problems with your hands and your mind, and at the end of the day you have something solid, something useful, hopefully something beautiful to show for your efforts. There's a very satisfying honesty in that process. I thought about my own career years spent in an office managing projects, dealing with deadlines and emails. There were rewarding moments, certainly achievements I was proud of, but his description of his work sparked a faint wistfulness in me, a longing for that kind of tangible creation he described. I envy you that clarity, I admitted. Sometimes in my line of work things can feel so intangible, memos and meetings and bottom lines. It's harder to see the direct impacts sometimes, I think. Every kind of work has its own challenges and rewards, he said, with a diplomacy that was rather endearing. My mom always said you were brilliant at navigating all that officer complexity, at bringing people together to get things done. That's a skill. Too valuable. One. Carol is generous. I smiled. But thank you, it was nice to hear, especially from him. It made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. We turned onto my street, Maple Drive, lined with the mature maple trees that gave it its name there. Leaves rustled gently in the evening breeze, a soothing sound. My house was about halfway down the block, a cozy two-story with a porch I love to sit on during summer evenings. So how long are you planning to stay in town? I asked as we approached my driveway. Another couple of weeks, probably, he replied. The workshop is a bigger project than I initially estimated. Or maybe I'm just slower than I thought. He gave a self-deprecating smile. Plus Mom seems to enjoy having someone around to boss a little. I'm sure she does, I laughed. She's missed having you around, I know. She talks about you often, she does. He sounded genuinely surprised. Of course. She's very proud of you, Liam. He seemed to consider this, a faint flush rising on his neck. Well, she has a funny way of showing it. Sometimes usually involves a long list of chores. That's Mother Codifer. I love you, and I'm glad you're here, I said, only half joking. He pulled into me driveway, the truck's engine idling with that familiar comforting rumble. Hettoned in his seat to face me more directly, the light from my porch lamp, which I always left on when I was out in the evening, cast a warm glow into the cab, illuminating his features. Those kind eyes of his father, yes, but with an intensity and depth that was all his own. Well, Eleanor, he said, his voice a little softer now. We're here. Thank you again, Liam, I said, my hand on the door handle, for the ride and for the scenic detour and the conversation. It was lovely. The pleasure was all mine, he replied, and there was a sincerity in his tone that made my heart feel a little lighter. Seriously, It was nice to talk about something other than rusty tools and what to do with Dad's collection of slightly too short extension cords is mild. I can imagine perhaps if you find yourself with some free time away from the workshop excavation, and you're not already booked for rescuing stranded yogis. I hesitated, then plunged ahead feeling a surprising boldness. I make a pretty good pot of tea, and my porch is quite pleasant in the evenings. His eyes met mine, and there was a spark of something in them, surprise perhaps, but also a warmth that was unmistakable. I'd like that. Eleanor, I'd like that very much. Good, I said, feeling a little flutter of something pleasant and unexpected. Let me give you my number so you don't have to go through the Carol dispatch system. We exchanged numbers, a simple modern ritual, but somehow felt more significant in the quiet intimation of the old truck's cab. As I stepped out onto my driveway, I turned back. Drive safely, Liam will do, he said, that gentle smile gracing his lips again. And Eleanor, yes, thanks for understanding out Dad's spot and about the quiet conversations anytime. Liam, I said softly. I watched as he backed the old Ford out of my driveway, its tail lights disappearing down the street, leaving me standing there in the warm evening air. The crickets chirped, the maples rustled, and the scent of my neighbor's roses drifted towards me. I walked up to my porch, not going inside immediately. I sank into one of my wicker chairs, the one that creaked. Just so, the yoga class felt like a distant memory, now overshadowed by the unexpected journey home. Liam, Carol's son, he was well. He was a surprise, a very pleasant one. Thoughtful, articulate, with a quiet depth that I found incredibly appealing. Not in a romantic way, heavens. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was a connection of a different kind. A meeting of minds perhaps. A shared understanding that transcended age or circumstance. The "Yao won't believe what happened" part of that silly mental headline I'd imagined Carol would use suddenly felt rather apartment, because anything scandalous or dramatic had occurred, but because something quietly profound had a simple car ride, had turned into an exploration of memory, legacy, and the unexpected. Way human beings can connect. I felt a sense of lightness, a feeling that something new and interesting had just brushed against my life. And as I sat there listening to the sounds of the evening, I realized I was looking forward to that cup of tea on the porch with Liam very much, so it felt like the beginning of an unexpected and rather wonderful friendship. I went inside a little while later, the house quiet and welcoming. I made myself a cup of herbal tea, not the robust kind I'd offered Liam, but something soothing for the end of the day. As I sat at my kitchen table, the events of the late afternoon and evening replayed in my mind. The initial slight awkwardness of waiting for Liam, the sight of that characterful old truck, his easy smile, the way our conversation had flowed so naturally from his father's workshop to the nature of creative work, to that beautiful shared silence at the scenic overlook. It was rare, I mused, to connect with someone so readily, especially someone from a different generation. There was often a gap, not necessarily in understanding, but in shared experience or perspective. Yet with Liam it hadn't felt that way. He possessed an emotional intelligence, a maturity that belied his years, or perhaps was perfectly in keeping with a man who worked with his hands and thought deeply about the world. He had listened, truly listened when I spoke, and he had shared his own thoughts with an openness that was both refreshing and disarming. There was no artifice about him, no attempt to be anything other than who he was. And in turn, I felt I could be completely myself with him, without the usual social filters one sometimes employed. That moment at the overlook when he spoke of his father, and the idea of putting worries into perspective, that had resonated deeply. How often had I let small anxieties consume me, forgetting to step back and see the larger picture? His simple act of sharing that spot and his father's wisdom felt like a gift, and my invitation for tea, it had been spontaneous, a genuine desire to continue the conversation, to nurture this connection. His acceptance, equally genuine, had warmed me. It wasn't about age or him being my friend's son. It was about two people who have found a comfortable, interesting space in each other's company. I thought about personal discovery. I'd gone to yoga, seeking flexibility and peace, and in a way, I'd found a different kind of opening and openness to new connections, to perspectives that could enrich my own Liam. In his quiet way had prompted me to reflect on my own life, my work thievings. I valued not through any direct questioning, but simply by being himself and sharing his own journey. There was a subtle tension, too not an uncomfortably, but the gentle of something new and unmapped. What would this friendship, if that's what it was to become, look like? I wasn't sure, but I felt a pleasant anticipation rather than any apprehension. It was the kind of tension that sparks curiosity, that makes you look forward to the next chapter. The mutual respect was undeniable. He respected my experiences, my friendship with his mother, my lopsided knitting projects. And I respected his skill, his thoughtfulness, his connection to his father's memory. It was a comfortable foundation. As I finished my tea, I realized that "You won't believe what happened" wasn't about a shocking event. It was about the quiet surprise, oft genuine human connection happening in the most ordinary of circumstances. A car ride home from yoga. It was about the unexpected depth found in a near stranger, and the realization that meaningful encounters can come at any time, from any direction, if you're open to them. I rinsed my cup, a smile lingering on my face. The house felt a little less empty tonight, filled with the resonance of shared thoughts and the promise of future conversations. Yes, a thought I was definitely looking forward to. That tea on the porch, it felt like a small beacon of warmth and interest in the landscape of my days, and that in itself was a rather wonderful thing to have.